Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment, we're going to discuss Bangladesh and how it is dealing with, of course, the many Rohingyas that fled over into its territory once, of course, the Myanmar military started persecuting in great numbers and with very harsh measures the Rohingya within their own country there in Myanmar, of course, and especially in Rakhine State. Nevertheless, now Bangladesh has decided to move a lot of these Rohingya onto an island, which human rights groups and others say is flood-prone, is prone to cyclones, etc. The Bangladeshi authorities insist, though, that the facilities that they have built there are actually fit for purpose, are good for the Rohingya, that they'll be able to stay there for a longer period of time in more comfort. So the 2 and 4 arguments for this and against this, pardon me, are quite vast and in detail, of course, and I want to discuss that now with our viewers, with our experts, pardon me, who are joining us now. Joining us from Frankfurt are Ro San Nguyen, who is the co-founder of the Free Rohingya Coalition, and joining us from Bangkok is Dr. Robin Ramcharan, who is the Executive Director of the Asia Center. Robin and Nasan, thank you both for joining us here in Scope. Robin, let me start with you. It's not easy, obviously, what Bangladesh is dealing with, right? I imagine at some level it's been, overwhelmed by the amounts of Rohingya that have come into the country. But at the same time, of course, it has international obligations to treat these people right, according to international law as well. Is it being able to balance this, do you think?
Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here and to be with your other guests also. As you rightly point out, we have to acknowledge that Bangladesh has a tremendous, if I may call it, burden to bear, over the last 3 years and more. So Bangladesh has jurisdiction over the Rohingya refugees, and it is doing its best, let's say. About 2 years ago, I was in Dhaka for a conference to address this particular issue. Academics, governments, civil society were all there, and we could see how difficult it is for Bangladesh, and they were appealing to the international community very strongly for assistance, financial assistance, and so on. So they have been bearing the burden, and we must recognize that. I think Bangladesh has been doing its best to uphold its commitments under international law. Bangladesh, of course, is not party to the Refugee Convention. However, it has nevertheless, like so many other countries, including Thailand, it has sought to uphold the basic rules of refugee law, international refugee law. So I think that starting point must be recognized.
Okay.
Maybe I will stop there, and we can add some more later.
Definitely. The conversation continue. Nasan, on that topic of Bangladesh, what are your thoughts about this? Because certainly, the Rohingya are there. At this point in time, of course, there are no signs of them going back to Myanmar at this point in time. So how then, and what then should happen? Because Cox's Bazar is very overcrowded as well.
Yep. Yeah, we understand the position of the Bangladesh government. I visited the camp a few times. I had also meeting with the government official and the many other, at the local level as well. But since the Rohingya are, not willing to go there because they're afraid that they will be isolated, they will not be allowed to visit to the mainland anymore. And also they are concerned about the cyclone and many other things. Since the time the Bangladesh plan to relocating refugee in 2015, UN said clearly that this is logistically challenging, and also experts were saying, that there are the concern about the national disaster. So since 2018, they have tried a few times and they postponed the plan. Finally, the Bangladeshi foreign minister has said, they will turn it to the resort or the place for the homeless people, But even the homeless didn't agree to go there. So now, yesterday, 1,642 men, women, and the children were transported there. They are already there now. Mostly claim that, they were forced to take this part of the first batch. This is the first batch. They are planning to send 100,000. So we will hear a lot of stories. You have got a lot of story from AFP and the AP and the writer. Even some people were beaten. This should not be happen. If they are willing to go, they can go. But mostly, as I am dealing with most of the refugee civil society organization in the camp, mostly they don't want to go there.
And that's a very good point you made there, Nasan. If you allow me to come, because Robin, that's the key right here, isn't it? That it needs to be voluntary, right, on the part of those who are going. And as we can obviously understand, I imagine that if any of us were, God forbid, in the position that the Rohingya find themselves in, away from their homeland, in a foreign place, and then now are being transported somewhere else, and they don't know the details necessarily about that, there is obviously a deficit of trust, and it's understandable to have that. How then and what then does Bangladesh, do you think, need to do to then gain that trust and show these people that, okay, this is really good for them, if it is good for them?
I think I echo the concerns of our colleague who was just speaking. Definitely, there are concerns, and so one of the key concerns is the lack of transparency in terms of, for example, selecting those who will go. How did they select these people? Did they ask them? Did they consent? Do they know what they are getting into? Do they know anything about the location? So I think overcoming this lack of trust, this trust deficit, overcoming these concerns requires, for example, that a neutral third party be allowed in. I understand that the United Nations, rights groups, and so on are not being given access to the island, which, as you have pointed out, faces certain risks, including that of what do you call them? These strong storms. Sorry, the name just escapes me. Strong storms, flooding, and so on. The government says that, okay, they have built some infrastructure, but why not open it up and let the world see and reassure the world that this is a livable place? So be transparent, allow some neutral third parties to have access, and reassure the world that there is adequate living space, that there is adequate health services, that they may have access to education, to medicines, and the like. So these are definitely huge concerns, which we all share.
So Nasan, has your organization, for example, been approached, or have you approached, for example, Bangladeshi authorities? I imagine there are other, of course, organizations like yours as well, which have influence with the Rohingya on the ground, or some, at least a connection. Does that need to happen? Would you get involved? Are you involved?
Yeah, I myself, and officially talking with many officials, I know a lot of diplomats from the foreign ministry. I have been having conversation with them. Sometime, I got the very good news, like, they are going to stop this plan, When the Bangladeshi foreign minister said, that they will turn it to the resort or the place for the homeless, we were very happy. But suddenly, since a week ago, we have been hearing that they will really implement the plan. A few months ago, a few dozen of Rohingya community leader and the camp leader, they visited the place, and they saw, that despite this is the good infrastructure, they don't really want to live there because, this is completely isolating from the mainland. This is the main concern for them. For me, the Bangladesh government, should stop this plan, instead of, relocating them to the very far place in the isolated islands, like it will be like the prison. So they empty land in the Cox's Bazar, they can arrange for that, and also refugee will be very happy since they want to live nearby the border. From some camp, they can even see their village. At least they will have the hope, that their expectation one day they can go back to their home
Exactly.
But by living in this Bhasan Char in the remote island, surely mentally they will suffer, because already more than 300 refugees there for a few months, and they have been suffering. They have been sending us message. They really want to live from this island. So this is like mentally they will be tortured.
Robin, I'll give you a word before I let both of you go. All of this, of course, Robin, is happening because these people had to leave Myanmar. And, we know that there is this case in the international court as well. In the overall macro issue then, when it comes to this situation about how the Rohingya have been treated by their own country, what are your views on that, and any resolution on the horizon, if at all?
I think this is, so Bangladesh will be facing a very long-term challenge, very long time for this to be resolved inside of Myanmar. Of course, we are all familiar with the multiple challenges facing Myanmar: the transition to democracy, the rule, the continuing authoritarian rule of the military, who basically constitutional changes will be very difficult despite the majority of the NLD in the country at the moment. So this will take quite some time. Can they go back to a 1940s Panglong agreement? That might be the ideal. The Rohingya community was there at that time, of independence and after, when this agreement was made. I understand, but your guest may know this better than me. The Rohingya community in Bangkok has also said, we were there, we participated in building this country, and here we are excluded and denied citizenship and so on. So I think, the way the internal political forces and geopolitical forces are aligned, it will take quite some time for it to be resolved. And of course, the rest of the country, and especially the minorities, will be watching how the government handles this issue. If the government cannot handle this issue vis-a-vis one of its minority groups, what does that say for its handling of the others in the rest of the country? So
I'll have to comment on that point, Robin. I do have to apologize for cutting you off there. We sincerely, of course, appreciate both Robin and Nasan for their time today and for sharing their expert insight with us. Unfortunately, the clock has gotten the best of us, but they're able to shed light, on the situation the Bangladesh faces. It's important, of course, to keep a spotlight on how Bangladesh treats these Rohingya. But as both of our guests said, we also need to appreciate the fact that it is dealing with a situation which is difficult and would be difficult for any country to deal with. And, Europe, just talking about the migrant, quote unquote, invasion, according to some far right politicians there, is having a hard time dealing with that. So you can just imagine with other countries in this region and other places around the world that have exponentially more refugees, asylum seekers within their borders, fleeing persecution from their respective homelands. That is a difficult situation. Nevertheless, yes, Bangladesh should be a lot more transparent in this process. Why exactly is it moving these people to this island, especially if they have not given their consent, which is anyone's right? You don't force people to move to a place where they're not comfortable moving because they feel that may be a dangerous place for them and their loved ones. I'll be back with my final segment after this break.